Jack watched Janet walk out of the bar, her hand tucked into Gregory's arm. He had wanted to make her jealous, but all he'd done was build another wall between them. He realized then that the secret wasn't just his protection, it was his prison. As long as the world believed he was who he claimed to be, he could never be the man who took Janet to the botanical gardens. He was the roommate, the best friend, the guy who made the pies. "Larry," Jack said, looking at his empty glass, "I think I need another beer." Chapter 11. The Gala Crashers. The night of the Botanical Gardens Gala arrived with a humidity that made Jack's hair frizz and his anxiety spike. He couldn't just sit in the apartment and wait for Janet to return with Gregory, likely smelling like expensive orchids and disappointment. "Jack, you're not really going to go, are you?" Chrissy asked, watching him struggle into a tuxedo jacket that Larry had borrowed from a funeral home. "I have to, Chrissy. I have a feeling about this Gregory guy. He's too perfect. Nobody who knows that much about ferns is entirely trustworthy." "I think you're just jealous," Chrissy giggled, "but I'll go with you. I always wanted to see the moonflowers bloom." The gala was a sea of silk, champagne, and people who looked like they had never tripped over a rug in their lives. Jack and Chrissy spent the first 20 minutes hiding behind a large potted palm, scanning the crowd for Gregory's tan and Janet's emerald dress. "There they are," Jack hissed, pointing to a fountain where Gregory was holding court with a group of wealthy donors. Janet stood beside him, her smile polite but her eyes looking slightly glazed over. "He's boring her to death," Jack whispered triumphantly. "Look at her. She's contemplating the structural integrity of the fountain just to avoid listening to him talk about soil pH. But then, Gregory did something that made Jack's blood boil. He handed Janet his empty glass and gestured toward the waiter, as if she were an assistant rather than his date. "That's it," Jack said, stepping out from behind the palm. "Nobody makes my Janet hold their trash." "Jack, wait," Chrissy called out, but she was quickly distracted by a man offering her a plate of tiny quiches. Jack intercepted a waiter, grabbed a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and made his way toward the fountain. He pulled his lapels tight and put on his best masked chef stare, minus the mustache this time. "Canapés, monsieur?" Jack asked, thrusting the tray under Gregory's nose. Gregory barely looked at him. "Not now, my man. I'm explaining the migratory patterns of the North American swallow." "But these are special canapés," Jack persisted, slipping into a vaguely French accent. "They are made with they. Secret sauce of justice." Janet's eyes snapped to Jack's. Her mouth fell open. "Jack?" "Non, madame," Jacques winked. "I am Jacques, from the kitchen, and I think your date has a—" Chapter 12. A dish, best served cold. The confrontation at the fountain didn't go exactly as Jack had planned. Gregory, realizing he was being mocked by a waiter who looked suspiciously like Janet's roommate, finally snapped. "Tripper, is that you?" Gregory sneered, his tan deepening into a shade of angry crimson. Janet stepped between them, her face flushed. "Jack, what are you doing?" "I'm rescuing you, Janet," Jack said, dropping the tray and the accent. "He's treating you like a servant. He hasn't stopped talking about himself for 3 hours. And he doesn't even know that your favorite flower isn't an orchid, it's a simple daisy." Gregory laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "A daisy? How quaint. Janet is a sophisticated woman. She deserves a life of luxury and Latin names, not a roommate who plays dress-up to pay the rent." "At least you're real," Janet suddenly shouted, surprising both men. She turned to Gregory, her eyes flashing. "You've spent the whole night trying to impress people with money you don't even have yet, Gregory. And you did make me hold your glass. 3 times. She took the champagne glass from her hand and poured it slowly and deliberately over Gregory's expensive shoes. "The soil pH in your shoes is about to change," Janet said firmly. She grabbed Jack's hand. As they walked toward the exit, Chrissy caught up with them, her mouth still full of quiche. "You missed the fireworks." "Chrissy," Jack smiled, his heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. Chapter 13. The Truth in the Rain. The drive back to Adobe Lane was quiet. A sudden coastal rain began to fall, drumming against the roof of Jack's old car. They parked in their usual spot, but nobody moved to get out. "Jack?" Janet said, her voice soft against the sound of the rain. "Yeah? Why did you really come to the gala? And don't say it was to rescue me from Gregory's shoes." Jack gripped the steering wheel. He knew this was the moment. The rain, the silence, the adrenaline of the gala, it was all pushing him toward the edge. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of you being with him," Jack whispered. "I couldn't stand the thought of you being with anyone who doesn't see how incredible you are." Gregory saw a trophy. "I see everything." Janet turned in her seat, her face inches from his. The light from the street lamp caught the moisture in her eyes. "Everything? I see the way you care for every plant in that shop. I see the way you keep us all together when things fall apart. And I see someone I don't want to live without. Not just because of the rent, Janet." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm tired of the disguises, Janet. I'm tired of being the masked chef, or the Jacqueline, or the gay roommate. I just want to be the guy who loves you." Janet didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, her breath hitching. "You've been that guy for a long time, Jack. You just thought you had to hide him." She leaned forward and kissed him, a soft, tentative kiss that tasted of salt and rain and years of unspoken promises. In that moment, the lie didn't matter. The landlord didn't matter. The world outside the car didn't exist. There was only the two of them, finally finding the truth in the middle of a beautiful, chaotic mess. "We're going to have a lot to explain to Mr. Furley tomorrow," Janet whispered against his lips. "Let him evict us," Jack laughed softly. "As long as we're evicted together." Chapter 14. Sunlight and Scrambled Eggs. The morning after was bright, unforgivingly so. The rain had washed the sky clean, but it couldn't wash away the electric tension that vibrated through the kitchen of apartment 304. Jack stood by the stove, mechanically whisking eggs. His heart was performing a drum solo against his ribs every time he heard the floorboards creak in the hallway. When Janet finally walked into the kitchen, wearing her favorite oversized flannel robe and looking slightly sleep-deprived but luminous, Jack nearly dropped the whisk into the sink. "Morning," Janet said, her voice a soft rasp. She didn't look at the coffee pot. She looked directly at him. "Morning," Jack replied, his voice cracking slightly. I made eggs. Scrambled. Because, my brain feels like scrambled eggs today." Janet walked closer, stopping just a few inches from him. The smell of her hair, still vaguely reminiscent of rain and sea spray, filled his senses. "Jack, about last night. In the car. Yeah?" Jack held his breath. It wasn't just the rain, was it? Or the adrenaline? "No," Jack said firmly, setting the pan down. He turned to face her fully, his gaze earnest. "It was the most honest thing I've done in 3 years, Janet, and I've spent the last 12 hours terrified that you'd wake up and regret it." Janet reached out, her hand resting on his forearm. "I didn't wake up with regret. I woke up wondering how we're going to survive breakfast without Chrissy noticing that something is different." As if on cue, the door to the second bedroom burst open. Chrissy skipped into the room, her blonde hair a chaotic tangle of bedhead, humming the Yum Yum song at a volume that was definitely too loud for 8 a.m. "Morning, roommates," Chrissy chirped, heading straight for the orange juice. "Ooh, Jack, you're making eggs. And Janet, you look all sparkly. Did we win something at the gala besides that plate of quiches I finished?" Jack and Janet sprang apart, as if they'd been caught at a crime scene. "Sparkly?" Janet laughed nervously, smoothing her robe. "It's just the light, Chrissy. New Santa Monica sunshine." "Well, whatever it is, I like it," Chrissy said, taking a huge gulp of juice. "By the way, Jack, you left your tuxedo jacket on the balcony. It looks like a wet penguin, and Mr. Furley was down there looking at it 5 minutes ago." Jack froze. "Furley saw the tuxedo?" "Yeah. He said he didn't know you were into formal penguin wear. He looked suspicious. Well, more suspicious than usual, like he'd just found out his ascot was a knockoff." Chapter 15. The Chrissy Conundrum. Telling Chrissy was supposed to be the easy part. After all, Chrissy was the person who once spent 3 hours trying to find a silent letter in a word by listening to it. But as Jack and Janet sat her down on the sofa later that afternoon, the gravity of the situation became apparent. "Chrissy," Janet began, holding Jack's hand under a cushion, "you know how Jack and I have always been just friends?" "Yeah," Chrissy nodded enthusiastically. "The bestest friends. Like peanut butter and more peanut butter."